She had made the dreaded trip by herself for years now. Outcasted, lost, rejected, left alone to deal with the reality of her poor choices. Waiting until noon appeared to be her best option. It was hot and the sun was intense, but not as intense as the glares and whispers of the other women. Bound for a life of loneliness, she gathered her supplies, put on her brave face, and set out to tackle another day. From the outside, she appeared in control, but inside, she desperately searched for meaning. There had to be more than this place where she even struggled to exist. Surely she was not meant to live with this intense loneliness inside. What was she missing? Where had she gone wrong? Was it too little too late for her to set out in search of answers, in search of meaning? In John chapter 4, we meet her, the unnamed Samaritan woman with a risky past. Jesus approaches her as she draws water from Jacob's well, and the encounter transforms her entire life. The Apostle John devoted 42 sections of scripture retelling the tale of Jesus' encounter with the woman at the well, making it the longest recorded conversation between anyone and Jesus in the entire Bible. At first glance, much would appear ordinary. Here's an unknown woman performing her everyday task of providing water for her family. Here's an unknown traveler resting from his long journey north in the shadow of Jacob's well. It certainly isn't the scene we would expect to deliver us one of the most profound theological statements in the entire Bible. But if you'll look a little closer with me, I think you might be moved by the significance of the encounter happening in front of us. Let's start with the well, Jacob's well. This well was located on the field that Jacob from our Old Testament bought so that he could pitch his tent in the land of Canaan. He built an altar there and called it El Hole Israel, the God of Israel. This piece of property was the first inhabitable piece of real estate any Israelite ever owned in the Promised Land. This field was Jacob's home. The home he would one day deed to his favorite son Joseph, meaning that one day it would become the place Joseph's bones were buried when Joshua finally led the Israelites across the Jordan River and back into their promised land after 40 years of wandering in the wilderness. Jacob, Joseph, Joshua, the Israelites, the Jordan River, the Promised Land. This piece of property was no ordinary piece of property. This well was located right in the center of God-ordained history. Every day, this woman drew her daily supply of water from a well richly anointed in God's goodness and God's provision. El Hole Israel, the God of Israel. As if the significance of the well weren't enough, the mere fact that we find Jesus resting beside us will show us how far out of his way God will go to encounter us in our brokenness. Every day, dozens of Jews did whatever it took to avoid Samaria. The Samaritans were considered unclean. The worst of the worst, Jews didn't associate with Samaritans. They just wouldn't do it. They simply wouldn't go there. Nothing would make them interact with them. To associate with the Samaritan would be to betray everything they stood for. Long before the first century, the Samaritans posed a problem for the Jews. They were a mixed race, a mixed religion. Their people descended from pagans who intermarried when the Assyrians conquered the northern kingdom in 722 BC. By the first century, they had built a distinct culture around the fusion of these two people groups. Their place of worship was in Mount Gerizim. Sanballat, the arch nemesis of Nehemiah, built a temple there to mimic the temple in Jerusalem. Their Samaritan religion blended Yahweh with paganism. basically meaning the Samaritans worshiped God, but they also worshiped gods. They held true to some forms of Judaism while allowing others to fall by the wayside. They muddied the waters on what it meant to really worship Jehovah. A form of idolatry the religious leaders wouldn't tolerate. A century and a half before Jesus came, Jewish armies destroyed the Samaritan temple. Even after the destruction of the temple, Gerizim remained the sacred place of worship for the Samaritans. By the time Jesus arrived on the scene, the Jewish contempt for the Samaritans was so intense that traveling Jews would add miles onto their route, crossing over the Jordan River, traveling through Decapolis, and crossing back over the Jordan River, all in an effort to avoid interacting with the Samaritan. But John 4:4 says Jesus had to go through Samaria. Jesus, known for not always following the rules and expectations of the religious leaders, was compelled to do what no other Jew would do. There was an encounter waiting for him there, a conversation, a transformation. Jesus simply had to go to Samaria. Resting by that well that afternoon, he saw her approaching. His journey up to this point had left him tired and thirsty. It was odd that she came alone and in the middle of the day. And even though he already knew the reason why, he approached her to ask for a drink. Startled by his question, she took a step back and looked around. Gender taboos, racial division, and social status were enough to keep a man of Jesus' stature from associating with such a woman, not to mention the fact that he was a Jew and she was a Samaritan. How is it that you are asking me for a drink of water? Do you even know who I am? Jesus, more thirsty for the heart of this woman than for a drink of her water, quickly took the focus of the subject off of her and turned it back onto him. If you knew who I was, you would be asking me for a drink of water, and I would give you living water. The woman, not fully understanding his offer of new life, but still smart enough to sense some type of superior claim going on here, dug a little deeper. Sir, the well is deep and you have nothing to draw with. How do you suppose you would get this living water? Are you greater than our ancestor Jacob, who dug the well and drank from it himself? Since we're privy to the end of the story, we already know the answer to her question. Jesus was greater than her ancestor Jacob, far greater, and he was about to show her how. This water he offered her was no ordinary water. It was spiritual water, water made to quench the deepest parts of her soul, finally leaving her satisfied, finally giving her what she looked for. Surely by now, she's picking up what he's throwing down. If this man in front of her has the ability to quench the spiritual thirst inside of her, then she wanted a drink. Please, she pleaded, give me a drink of your water. Knowing that his water was a water of truth, he told her to quickly go and get her husband and return. His request wouldn't have been an odd request, since during their day, a man could not converse in public with a woman without her husband present. But you and I both know that Jesus wasn't really trying to abide by society's rules. He was trying to find truth. If we're honest, we all can probably relate to the millions of excuses running rampant through her mind as she struggled to come up with an answer. Not wanting to lie to the rabbi in front of her, but still hoping to save face and not throw out every detail of her messy past, she landed on this simple statement: I have no husband. If we know anything to be true about Jesus in this moment, we have to believe that he repositioned himself so that she could clearly see his face was not a face of condemnation. And then with the most love imaginable, he gently pulled the covers back even further. You are correct when you say you have no husband. The truth is, you've had 5 husbands, and the man that you're living with right now isn't even your husband. What you have said is quite true. Her hesitation to reveal all didn't even bother him. He seemed confident that time would get them there. He knew her. He saw her. He didn't just see who she was, but he saw who she was becoming. He saw past the brokenness of a woman scorned and into the heart of a woman redeemed, of a woman set free. If I'm this woman, in this moment, my legs are shaking and I'm probably grabbing onto the well to steady myself. This man in front of me has just read my mail. Who is he? How does he know me? And more importantly, what is this thing happening inside of me, pulling me deeper and deeper into his presence? Why am I suddenly so tempted to believe that I might actually get to receive this water he's talking about? Nervous over the intensity of such a heavy conversation, she quickly changed the subject. I see you are a prophet. Our ancestors worshiped on this mountain, but you Jews, you claim that the place to worship is in Jerusalem. It had been an age-long debate. Who was right? The Jews, the Samaritans, Gerizim, Jerusalem? Was it possible that neither one of them were right? Could she have possibly grown up worshiping that which she did not know? Jesus, way more patient than us, allowed her to go whatever direction she deemed necessary with her conversation. Besides, he knew what she didn't. The era of the new covenant was on the horizon. A day was quickly approaching where worship would no longer be limited to where you are and what you do. Worship would no longer be controlled by religious practices and expectations. Soon, worship would become something beautifully unfolding within us. He smiled and shook his head. Woman, a day is coming where you will worship the Father neither on this mountain or in Jerusalem. Today, you worship in the dark. Tomorrow, you will worship in the light by the life that you live and the person you are. God is spirit and truth, and he desires worshipers who worship in spirit and in truth. It's people bringing all that they know of themselves before him, openly and honestly in their worship. She looked him straight in the eye. I know the Messiah is coming. When he comes, he will explain such things to us. Is it not significant that this woman, having grown up in a pagan culture, separated from Yahweh, had inside of her the same desires as the Jews? That she too longed to be with the one whom she was created for. She too hoped, she too believed. Though she may not have fully recognized it or even completely understood it, there was an aching deep inside of her to be a part of something bigger, to be a part of something more. As Peter walked with Jesus outside of the streets of Caesarea Philippi, he made the first declaration that Jesus was in fact the Son of God. Upon hearing his disciples claim, Jesus stopped dead in his tracks and looked him straight in the eye. Blessed are you, Peter, for there's absolutely no way you could have known that on your own. The only way you can say that is because my Father in heaven has revealed it to you. Could the same God once again be pulling back the veil and revealing himself to his beloved? Could he be the one pulling her deeper and deeper into authentic worship? Might the larger encounter this woman was having be her encounter with the Holy Spirit as he worked to open her eyes to the one whom she's desired from the very beginning? God was drawing her in. The longer she stood in his presence, the deeper she seemed to go. And then Jesus said what by now I'm confident she already had figured out. I am the Messiah for which you wait. It was the single most direct claim Jesus ever made. Never before in any biblical reference had he declared his identity so forthrightly to anyone. It would not happen again until his trial before Caiaphas. Standing before his death would be the next time he declared his identity so directly. Jesus, the Messiah she waited for, was standing in front of her, offering her a life of authentic worship. We know for a fact that she took it all in that afternoon standing by Jacob's well. We know because of her response. The longer she stood there, the more his redeeming love poured in. With his love bubbling up inside of her, she left behind her things and quickly ran back to town. Forgetting her previous hesitation, she made her way through the marketplace, urging her neighbors, "Won't you come and see? Come and see the man who told me everything I've ever done. Could he be the Christ? Might he be the Messiah? Won't you come and see for yourself?" It is the same invitation that we extend to you tonight. Won't you come and see? Will you come and spend an extended period of time in his presence? Will you come and offer all that you know of yourself to him? Will you push past the uncomfortable? Will you fight not to change the subject? Will you look directly into his eyes? Might he have something to say to you? Might he have something to show you? Is it possible that this is the encounter that changes everything?